All right, Lions Liberty fans, we are here live on Facebook. A couple young gentlemen here. The youngest one is right next to me here. This is David Spencer, the national coordinator of the Young Americans for the Convention of States. I got it right, didn't I?
Yes.
I practiced saying that a few times before. It's a lot of words. And then we've got Bryce Barris, who is the, I should shake your hand as well, David. We did this all off camera, but, we're going to be official here. Bryce Barris, who is the state director for the Young Americans for the Convention of States. I got it all right.
Yeah, great.
This is why we practice before we go live. I'm going to start with you, David, because you are very impressive. You are 15 years old.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you started, well, why don't you tell us your little story? How did you get started with this organization? How did this all come about? You started it when you were how old?
Between 12 and 13, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And originally, I got involved with the Republican Party in the Trump campaign. But then one day, I was took up to meet Mark Meckler at the Capitol, and he introduced me to Convention of States. And from there, it blossomed into forming the Young Americans for Convention of States and what we have now.
Okay. And so why don't you explain exactly what this organization is? What is the purpose of the Young Americans for the Convention of States?
Well, the Young Americans for Convention of States is to educate and to teach the kids about what they didn't learn in the schools and to create systems for self-governance chapters. Create systems for self-governance chapters where children can learn how to govern themselves and become active in their state legislatures and make a difference truly.
And what is the Convention of States itself? What is that term?
Well, Convention of States is a bipartisan grassroots organization to call an Article 5 Convention of the States and propose amendments under 3 application areas: term limits, fiscal restraints, and limiting the scope and jurisdiction of the federal government.
So you want to actually make changes to the Constitution to enshrine those into the law of the land?
Correct.
And Bryce, how did you get involved with this organization?
I signed up when I was 24 in 2014. 28 now, and what happened was I signed up online. First, I wasn't really sure about Convention of States at first. I wasn't sure. I signed up, and I read Mark Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments. I looked into it and into Rob Nadelson's work and other constitutional experts, and I was sold. I signed up to volunteer, and one of the national staff, Jenny, called me, says, "Hey, why don't you be the state director?" I'm like, "Whoa, really? The state director?" So I signed up to be the state director. I've been the state director since 2014 here in the great state of Louisiana.
Now, this all sounds like a great idea, right? On the surface, these are all things I think most libertarians can support. The question is, how do you actually make this happen? A, and then B, how do you actually, there are so many things in the Constitution that we have right now that are completely ignored by our politicians and our congressmen and senators. So how do you, well, we'll start with the first question. How do you actually go in terms of enacting this and getting this convention to occur in the first place?
Do you want to take care of the first? I'll take care of the second?
I'll take care of the first. So the way Article 5 works is you've got to get 2/3 of the states to call a convention. There's 34 states. They must agree on the topic of the convention. So you can't have 17 states for just term limits, 17 states for just a balanced budget limit. They got to agree on the topic. Once 2/3 make the call, you have the convention. Then the convention makes the recommendations. They make the recommendations in form of constitutional amendments. Then those amendments, once they pass the convention, once they get 26 states at the convention, then they're sent back to the states for ratification, where it takes 3/4 of the states, 38 states, to ratify whatever comes out of the convention. If an amendment gets 38 states, it becomes part of the Constitution.
So I guess the task of this organization, Convention of States, is to, within each state, rally support for this within the state. And then, so does the state legislature have to approve it? Is that where it comes from?
Yes.
And the very neat thing about this is our applications, we have petition signers in every single House district in America.
And what kind of response have you guys gotten? Obviously, you're here at the Libertarian National Convention. Obviously, I think most of your audience is probably going to be Republican, Libertarian. Maybe there is Democratic support that you found. I don't know. What kind of support have you been receiving here and out there in the world?
Well, I would say a solid 3/4 of the people that come up to our booth are either in support of this or they are eager to learn and understand what Convention of States is. And so overall, we've had a really good response with the libertarian crowd, and it's great to see so many people trying to fight for liberty and fight for the freedoms.
And I can tell you here in Louisiana, we passed the application in 2016. We got 100% Republican support, but we also got a lot of Democrats that joined us too, because they agree if we have to spend within our means, then the federal government has to do so too. So there is Democrat support for this. There's bipartisan support for this on both sides.
So why don't you tell me a little bit more about how this would actually work? Let's just say that the convention occurs, that these terms are passed, and so now what? How does this actually get enforced? How do we make sure that the federal government is actually reined in? We were just talking to Larry Sharp a few minutes before we got on the air, and he was questioning you in the same way. How do you actually plan to rein them in, in the real world, in a world where our politicians really pretty much ignore the Constitution, and they pretty much work for themselves and their constituency, but their constituency is usually major corporations, not really their voting constituency. So how do you intend to get this to actually take shape once, if you're able to get it passed through the convention?
Yeah. So the problem is there are fundamental structural problems with the federal government. One of the problems that we were just talking about before we went on the air was Congress has delegated its Article I powers to these administrative executive agencies. These agencies legislate by fiat. They're bureaucrats that are not elected by the people that legislate by fiat. The way you rein that in is through a constitutional amendment. You tell Congress, no, these powers given to you in Article I, Section 8 of the Constitution are not yours to give away.
You're not allowed to delegate them to other bodies.
You're not allowed to delegate them at all. That's one way. But talking about the Supreme Court, so once you get down to it, the courts really are really at the core of the issue, because it was the courts that okayed Congress to delegate its powers. So the question then becomes, how do you overturn a Supreme Court decision?
That is a good question.
Well, you can wait a lifetime for it to reverse itself. You could do that, right? I always like to point out slavery. How was the Dred Scott decision reversed? Worst Supreme Court history in the history of the Supreme Court. How was that reversed? Via constitutional amendment, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. That's how it was reversed.
So that's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're trying to do. Use Article 5, the state-driven process, to rein in the federal government, to overturn these court decisions, to put the federal government back in its constitutional cage.
I'm a little curious. Why do you necessarily need the convention of states to occur to pass amendments? Because there have been many amendments to the Constitution that have come in without this convention process. So why is it important to have this entire convention process to establish these as part of the Constitution, as opposed to the normal process where states just will ratify a new amendment to the Constitution as they have 20 some odd times in the past?
Well, you see, as Colonel George Mason said, whenever in the late stages of ratification, he said, well, in Article 5, it shows that the Congress has the power. The Congress has the power to propose amendments, but not the states. And if we don't give the states power, then a tyrannical legislature will never restrain its power and will never do anything to stop its overreach. And so that's why we have to use the state legislature option, Article 5, to rein back in the government, because they're never going to fix the problems. Congress will never and has never fixed the problems that they caused.
Very simply, what we're doing now isn't working. We need to try something else. I'm not saying elections aren't important. You need to do your civic duty and vote. You need to join campaigns for your favorite candidates. We need to do those things, but there's something else we could be doing too. And that's calling for an Article 5 convention of the states. Because like David just said here, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
So where are we now in terms of progress with this organization? Is a convention something that you can see on the horizon maybe in your lifetime, because you're very young? In my lifetime?
Yes, I would think in your lifetime. Right now we're at 12 states across the country, of the 34 needed to call the convention.
And you have the full support you need in those 12 states, you're saying?
Those 12 states are already passed. The applications are already passed.
So that's done.
Yes.
And Louisiana is one of those states.
So you must be doing pretty well with your job.
Oh, we're doing pretty well. Actually, we just had another piece of legislation passed regarding Article 5 in Louisiana, our Commissioner Selection Act. So some people ask us, who are going to be the people at this convention? Well, the states are going to select the people. Well, how do we know that? Well, Louisiana just passed its own Commissioner Selection Act. The state legislature is going to choose who goes to the convention. We have 5 particular commissioners that are going to go, and we've included state legislator and citizen activists within the delegation. So that's who's going to be at this convention, and they're going to be restrained. The legislature is going to give them instructions. They're commissioners, so they will receive a commission from the legislature, and they're not allowed to go beyond those instructions.
Very impressive, guys. I think this is a really interesting idea. I'm sure this is a place here at the Libertarian National Convention where you can get a lot of traction and a lot more support. I'm sure that's why you guys are here working hard on it. Is there any last words you want to say about this to anybody? And of course, feel free to plug away on both your organizations' websites, the Facebook pages, the whole deal.
Well, you know, I really encourage each and every one of you to like our Facebook page. It's just simply Convention of States. Go to our website, conventionofstates.com, and sign the petition, because this is truly a fight for liberty. It's a fight for our America. This is a cause that it isn't going to take a party, it isn't going to take a candidate. It's going to take each and every one of you out there working to fight for what you believe in.
Bryce, any last words?
Yeah. This movement is all about liberty and self-government. That's what we're all about, returning power not only back to the states, but to the people and to their local communities. That's what this is. That's essentially what we're trying to do.
I think the Libertarian National Convention is a pretty welcoming home for that message. So, gentlemen, David, thank you so much. Bryce, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
The question facing us and facing our fellow countrymen is a 2-word question, very simply: who decides? The American founders had a simple answer: we, the people, decide.